Chapter 8. Commander? He sat at lunch in the mess hall eating a sandwich and looked up when I addressed him.
Hello, Andi. Can I help you?
I didn't like that he called me Andi. After all, I'd just met him the day before. But shaking off my feelings, I resolutely held a closed tube out to him. I need a favor.
Yes?
Did he recall our conversation from hours before, I wondered? I'd had to wait until lunch to speak with him since I wasn't supposed to visit engineering. He was practically a stranger, but I didn't know who else to ask, and I needed to know the answer to this. I took a blood sample earlier. Could you tell me what to test for that disease you told me about? He nodded earnestly.
I'd be glad to, though it would be easier for me to test it myself if you don't mind.
Again, his small, dark eyes seemed to search me intensely for a moment. I don't mind. I'd be grateful. I handed him the tube. I didn't think you'd know how.
I can do more than engineering, he chuckled. I'm no doctor, but I can manage a few simple things. I don't know if I'll have time today. Captain Trent wants the attitude control back online quickly.
That's perfectly all right, I assured. Just whenever you have time. I took a couple steps backwards, then turned to leave. His voice stopped me.
Andi,
he said. I closed my eyes and just said it. Miss Lloyd, please.
Miss Lloyd?
He persisted. Yes, sir?
I don't think you should say anything to your father about this.
I bit my lip and turned to face him. I don't keep secrets from my father, Commander.
Nodding, he spoke quickly. I respect that, but I'm worried that he might...
He hesitated here, and I cut him off. My father wouldn't hurt me.
Of course not.
Again, that doubtful tone.
But Andi...
Miss Lloyd?
Miss Lloyd, what if you do have it? How could he not have known?
I couldn't figure out how to answer that, so I pretended he hadn't said it. Thank you for your help. This time I walked away and barely heard him call after me, "You're welcome." As I walked, I looked around again for the doctor. Surely he was up now. A moment searching among the full tables proved futile, but close observation showed me that neither the captain nor Guilders were there either. That gave me a pretty good clue as to where they might be. Not feeling hungry, I trotted out of the room, trying to shake off the tension that I'd felt building up during the conversation with Commander Howitz. Not tension between him and myself, tension within me. I rode the elevator down to C deck and trotted down the hall to the captain's quarters at the end of the hall. The door didn't slide open automatically when I approached it, so I pressed the small white button on the wall just to the right. A muffled chime sounded from within, and the captain called,
"Come in. It's unlocked."
I pushed another button to open the door, and it slid upwards, revealing the bright, open room. A hearty laugh rang out as I stepped in, and I saw the three men I was looking for seated around a small table, each with a drink. A checkers game lay between the captain and Guilders, half played, but neither of them seemed to have much interest in it. The doctor sat back in his chair, fingering his glass, and I thought he still looked exhausted. When he saw me, he smiled. "How are you feeling?" I asked, walking forward. He shook his head, and the captain said,
"I'm trying to convince him to go lie down. I think he's coming down with something."
As I crossed the room, I glanced around. On the walls hung shelves which displayed mementos of the captain's past journeys, and a shelf of electronic books including everything from engineering manuals to history to Tennyson and Shakespeare. The room was well lit and had a large window on one wall, which at the moment showed stars flying past. A plain but comfortable bed stood against one wall, and on the other side of the room were two upholstered chairs and a small leather sofa clustered around a silver heater. Positioned near the window was the small table where the captain and one or both of his close friends often shared a drink. I approached the doctor and stood behind him, laying a hand on his shoulder. "Are you all right?" He shrugged, and I let my hand fall away.
"I'm just so tired. Maybe I'm getting too old for this job." "Oh, nonsense, Jerry." The captain finished the dregs of his drink and pushed his cup away. "You do a fine job. You're just a little run down. Maybe I'll hire a nurse sometime, let you take a vacation. It's been too long since your last shore leave."
I cut him off as soon as I could without being disrespectful, wanting to avoid more talk of nurses. Did you get any rest earlier, Doctor? The doctor shook his head. I tried, but couldn't sleep.
Go rest, Gerard, Gilders suggested, pushing his drink aside and moving a checker.
The doctor shook his head. I'll go in a minute. What did you need, Andi? Nothing, I just...
Would you do me a favor, then? The captain asked.
Yes, sir. I straightened up, prepared to take orders.
It's just that Baker always forgets to dust my books. I would do it myself, but Gilders wants me to play.
By Gilders' quiet scoff, I gathered that it was more the other way around, but I smiled. Of course.
Cloths are in the cabinet. Thanks, Andi.
The captain moved his piece.
The doctor grunted. Trent, you're a big boy. Can't you keep your room clean yet? Never learned, the captain said, studying the board.
I reached into a cabinet next to the bookshelf and pulled out a soft dusting cloth. Then I turned to the books. There weren't many of them, but he had more than most people on the ship. Most officers could fit all their titles on one electronic reader and didn't mind having all of them mixed up together. Not so Captain Trent. He liked to have smaller readers and more of them, and he had them all organized by author. Byron, Dickens, Milton, Plato. He had every classic anyone could name. As I pulled the books off the shelf one by one, I thought about my own readers. I was not quite as organized, and I owned 6 readers, 5 of them full and the 6th still with some room left. I didn't think most of the crew owned any conventional books other than the doctor, who distrusted electronic readers and preferred to turn real paper pages. I myself had only one conventional book, and I smiled as I imagined the soft brown leather cover underneath my fingers. It was fitting that my most important book should be my only real book, I thought. The conversation over the checkers game went on, the doctor leaning back and criticizing each move.
Don't take so long to think, Gilders, the captain complained as the older man sat observing the board. I need to get back to the bridge and... He consulted his wristcom. 10 minutes.
Gilders reached forward and picked up a black checker.
If you took a little longer to think, you might win sometimes.
He jumped his piece over 2 of the captains.
The captain groaned. I do win sometimes, he protested, handing his pieces over. I would think you would have noticed that, Trent, the doctor scolded.
I smiled as I dusted the books.
By the way, Jerry, the captain spoke up after a moment of silence, what have you found out about Andi's problem? Her knee, I mean. What happened on the bridge?
I didn't turn to look, but a slight shiver tickled down my back in the momentary silence that followed.
Nothing, the doctor said. I mean, something happened, but I don't know what.
His voice dismissed further questioning, and I bit my lip as I dusted a crimson copy of Shakespeare's plays. There was no further conversation for several minutes, and a bold question entered my mind. I had to work up the courage to ask it, so it wasn't until a few books later that I spoke. Have any of you ever heard of Langham's disease? For a moment, no one answered. I didn't turn around, but tried to hide my red face among the books.
No, said the captain.
I hadn't expected him to be the first to speak.
Why do you ask?
Before I could answer, the doctor's voice, weary, spoke.
I know something about it.
That was all. The chill of nervousness chased down my spine again. Somehow I didn't want to face him, but I wondered what his expression was. I waited for him to say something else, but he didn't. I wasn't planning on pursuing the topic further, but Gilders started his own answer to my question.
My niece and grandniece were both diagnosed with it, shortly after my grandniece was born.
This interested me. What happened? I asked, still dusting.
They both died.